Have you ever wondered what sequence of events led the world to engage in one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, the Second World War? A web of circumstances, decisions and actions, each born from the ashes of the First World War, weaved the tapestry of this colossal conflict. At its core lay the Treaty of Versailles, a peace agreement that sought to end the Great War, but instead sowed the seeds of resentment, particularly in Germany, burdening it with crippling reparations and territorial losses. Simultaneously, the world saw the rise of totalitarian regimes. In Germany, Italy, and Japan, charismatic leaders exploited nationalistic sentiments, economic crises, and fear, leading their nations down a path of aggression and expansionism. They defied international norms, raising the specter of another global conflict. And so the 1930s rolled on, a decade of escalating tensions and broken pacts, a provocative prelude to the global storm that was brewing. So, the stage was set for a global conflict that would redefine the course of human history. The year is 1939 and the world watches in shock as Germany invades Poland. Under the aegis of Adolf Hitler, the German forces, equipped with the innovative Blitzkrieg strategy, descend upon Poland. This Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, is a swift, concentrated military offensive intended to hit hard and fast, leaving the enemy little time to respond. Poland, caught off guard, is unable to resist the onslaught, and within a month, its fate is sealed. While the world watches this spectacle in disbelief, a grim reality settles in. This is not a minor skirmish or a border dispute. It's the ignition of a conflict that will soon engulf the globe. In response to this unprovoked aggression, Britain and France, allies of Poland, declare war on Germany. Yet, despite their declarations, they are unable to provide substantial support to beleaguered Poland. Meanwhile, the Axis powers, a coalition spearheaded by Germany, Italy, and Japan, begin their rapid expansion across Europe and the Pacific. In Europe, country after country falls like dominoes to the relentless advance of the German Wehrmacht. Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and finally France, all submit to the Axis onslaught. In the Pacific, Japan, spurred by imperial ambitions and a thirst for resources, begins its own conquest, seizing territories from China to Southeast Asia. Yet, amidst the chaos and despair, there's a glimmer of hope. A beacon of resistance emerges in the form of Winston Churchill, the newly appointed Prime Minister of Britain. He rallies his people and the world with stirring speeches, vowing to fight on the beaches, in the fields, in the streets, and on the hills, but never to surrender. As 1941 dawns, the world is fully engulfed in war. From the frozen tundra of the Soviet Union to the sun-drenched islands of the Pacific, from the ancient cities of Europe to the vast plains of Africa, the shadow of conflict is cast far and wide. Yet, as the year progresses, the tide of war begins to shift, setting the stage for some of the most dramatic and pivotal moments in history. By 1941, the world was fully engulfed in war, but the tide was about to turn. 1941 marked a significant shift in the war's direction. The winds of conflict started to turn, and the world watched as the storm began to change its course. In the Pacific, a day that will forever live in infamy occurred. Pearl Harbor, a tranquil U.S. naval base in Hawaii, was unexpectedly targeted by the Japanese forces. This audacious attack jolted the United States out of its isolationist stance. The nation which had once stood on the sidelines now found itself thrust into the center of this global conflict. The entry of the United States, with its formidable industrial strength and resources, was a game-changer, tipping the scales towards the Allies. Simultaneously, halfway across the world, a city bore the brunt of the war's fury. Stalingrad, a city named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin himself, became the arena for one of the most grueling battles in human history. The German forces, under Adolf Hitler's command, were determined to capture the city at all costs. However, they underestimated the tenacity of the Soviet defenders and the brutalities of the Russian winter. The Battle of Stalingrad was a war of attrition, with both sides paying a heavy toll. But it was here, amidst the frozen ruins of the city, that the Red Army held its ground, marking the first significant defeat of Hitler's forces. These two pivotal events, separated by thousands of miles, were paradoxically intertwined. The attack on Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Stalingrad signaled a shift in momentum. The Allies, who had been on the defensive, found new vigor and determination. The United States brought its industrial might to bear, while the Soviet Union showcased its indomitable spirit and resilience. The year 1941 did not just mark a year in the war, it marked a turning point, a shift in the tides of this global conflict. With the entry of the United States and the resilience of the Soviet Union, the wheels of war began to turn. As the war entered its final years, the Allies pushed back. Gathering strength and resources, the Allies were ready to swing the pendulum of war in their favor. The year 1944 saw one of the most significant events of the Second World War, the D-Day invasion. Thousands of soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, in a desperate and daring attempt to regain control from the Axis powers. This successful operation marked the beginning of the end for the Axis, as the Allies steadily regained territory in Western Europe. But the war was not yet over. As the world held its collective breath, a new age dawned with the creation of the most destructive weapon known to humanity, the atomic bomb. In a bid to hasten the end of the war and prevent further loss of life, the United States took a step that would forever change the course of history. In August of 1945, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was unimaginable, the human cost horrific. This unprecedented show of force shocked the world and led to Japan's unconditional surrender, marking the end of the war in the Pacific. Soon after, the remaining Axis powers also capitulated, unable to sustain the fight against the relentless Allied forces. The final years of the Second World War were a time of significant change, marked by decisive battles, scientific breakthroughs, and a shift in the global balance of power. The world watched as nations fell and rose again, as old alliances were shattered and new ones formed. The war had taken a toll on every continent, every country, every individual. The world had changed, and the echoes of this brutal conflict would reverberate through the decades to come, shaping the course of history. In 1945, after 6 years of brutal conflict, the Second World War came to an end, and with it came a new era, an era of rebuilding and reflection, of lessons learned and hopefully, never to be repeated. The war was over, but its effects were far from finished. As the dust of conflict settled, the world had to grapple with a new reality. The aftermath of the Second World War was as significant as the war itself, setting the stage for a new world order. The first significant outcome was the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. This international organization was created to prevent another global conflict and to foster international cooperation. The UN aimed to achieve global peace, promote human rights, and support social progress. It became a platform for dialogue among nations, a beacon of hope for a world scarred by the ravages of war. But even as the UN was being established, the seeds of a new conflict were being sown. The Cold War, a battle of ideologies between the capitalist West and the communist East, began to take shape. It was a war of attrition, a war of espionage, a war fought not on the battlefield but in the hearts and minds of people. The world was divided into 2 blocks, each vying for global dominance. One of the most poignant symbols of this division was Germany. Once a single nation, Germany was divided into East and West, a physical manifestation of the ideological divide. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, stood as a stark reminder of the deep fissures created by the war. Yet, beyond these geopolitical shifts, the most profound impact of the war was the human cost. Millions of lives were lost, cities were reduced to rubble, and generations were scarred by the horrors of war. The aftermath was a time of healing, of rebuilding, and of coming to terms with the past. As we reflect on the aftermath of the Second World War, we are reminded of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The world has moved on, but the lessons of the war continue to reverberate. The scars of the Second World War still remain visible today, a sobering reminder of the cost of global conflict. From its inception to its end, the Second World War was a period of profound change and devastation. We began our journey with the provocative prelude, the simmering tensions that led to the ignition of this colossal conflict. We then navigated the labyrinth of major events that marked the war's progression. The turning tide where the Axis powers' fortunes began to wane was a pivotal chapter in our narrative. The final years, painted with a palette of desperation and determination, brought us to the doorstep of the war's denouement, and then we delved into the aftermath, the reverberations of the war that continue to echo in our world today. This conflict, marked by its unprecedented scale and impact, shifted the axis of the world, both literally and metaphorically. It left an indelible imprint on human history, a stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences of unchecked aggression and intolerance. As we remember the Second World War, let us reflect on the lessons it has taught us and strive for a future of peace and understanding.